so the idea of, systems change, and we've like talked, I've talked about systems change before, and like how that's like an important part of what we want all brain belong to be doing. Like, can you say like what system change like that, means to you, or could mean to you?
Yeah, well, I think as we were talking about, ideas and energy and drive comes from the people up rather than this top down where it's being dictated to you what you should be doing or not doing or how you should be doing it. Um, and the co-creation piece, I think, is part of that. Like if I think about, I always think about like say public services, like food stamps or Section 8 or Social Security or those kind of things. Like those systems would work so much better if they actually paid attention to how people are using it and the barriers that they're facing with it, right? If they were actually acting on the things that aren't working, it would be so much easier.
I could not agree more. And like, it's actually not that hard to ask people, even like, but I think it's a lens of, I want to know, I want real-time feedback on what I'm doing so that I can make little tinkers and adjustments. I wonder if in like a big system, you just realize that you couldn't even make changes. So why bother asking feedback? I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think about the importance of having folks with lived experience in those positions that can make change at that level because of, otherwise you're kind of talking to the wall. Like you have a few people who kind of get it and they're sympathetic, but um, if you have people in positions of power who can actually lead the way and model, like this is a different way to do it, I think that's the way to have the change, really. So, like having, you're working with people about employment, I think that's a really powerful model for sure, because then those people can model for other people, right? That they can see that it can be done. Like I got asked to speak at a class a few months ago, and I was very open about my own like neurological challenges and my family and da 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 da. But I also talked about how I felt like I was in a very privileged place to be able to have a job that really valued all of those parts of me, right? And I had feedback from the students. They go, "Wow, it is possible to like actually be myself someplace and be valued and have work and take care of myself. Like I don't have to bend myself into these knots that aren't realistic, or I don't have to feel bad that I can't make my brain do something different than what it can do." Um, and so I think that's where those changes happen, right? Like those small moments where you can actually, you never know how you're changing somebody's life just by talking about something.
Right. Because I think that at least for me, sometimes I don't have language to understand my experience until I've heard someone else name it. And I'm like, oh, I would never have come up with those words, but that is the exact thing that goes on in my head. Wow. Whether I hear it or I read it or something.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's why it's just so, I think it's important that even though everybody can't be happy with everything, I think it's still important to have the platform and the opening there. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm not going to be able to please everybody all
Right.
the Mhm.
Right. Because if you're pleasing everyone, the only way to really do that is if you're serving a group of people who has homogenous goals. And,
Mhm.
there might be some reason for that if that's true. And it's okay to have a homogenous goal, like, a shared goal, like a shared vision, like, I believe that I want to come to a space where I can be my true self. Like, we can agree on that goal. But it's more big picture as opposed to I want this program to look like this.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great that you're still open to hearing all of that, even if some of those things people want aren't practical or they're hard to deal with or whatever. I think that you're providing the platform is the important part, right?
We are so proud of the model of co-creating programs with the people we're serving. And we're so like, we're just so into that, you know, and it's like really important to us, right? And then there's this line, there's this balance between like, you know, some centralization and some structure, and some, you know, balancing the organization's needs with the needs of the people in it. It's the conflicting access needs.
I'm remembering when my younger daughter started preschool, um, and she'd just been diagnosed with autism. She's only 4. Her language is coming. Had lots of angry outbursts, right? And so, on the one hand, we want her to be able to express herself and tell us what's going on. On the other, she had to learn how to operate in this system where it wasn't okay to do that. And it's still tricky, right? She's 18 now, and it's still tricky. Like, it's okay to be yourself. And in this situation, you have to put a lid on it, you know. Yeah, that's hard with people you don't know. I mean,
I have always like, and maybe this is just my PDA, but like I've always just found most systems unsafe. Like they just like, you can just like, just even as a little kid being like, this makes no sense. This is arbitrary. This is not, you know, oh, this is not open to feedback. You know, I remember even being like a middle schooler being like, you know, why don't you ask the students? Why, anyway, it just always felt like, not that systems are like really, maybe I could say this. Most systems are really designed to perpetuate systems. They're not really like, you know, so it just, it has always felt intuitive to me that starting over and starting something new, that wasn't part of a system, would be more effective, at least faster, a lot, at least faster to get some sort of impact to happen. And maybe it's just my brain that delayed gratification is really hard for me. I want that thing now. I want it right now, not because I'm gonna get distracted, but because like it's otherwise just too hard. Anyway, but I think at All Brains Belong, it's all these little things that it would be really difficult to do in, let's say, a traditional medical system. But I think that having the opportunity to share what we're doing has been really cool, because some of it actually is reproducible in traditional systems, but at least to get into the weeds of like, well, this is what our menu looks like this is what universal design for medical care looks like, and you know, this is actually doable. You can just really, anyway, but because I think like you're saying, the student who for the first time hears that like it's a thing that you can be a professional with a job and like not be contorting yourself in 50,000 ways, like I think professionals also need to hear that you don't have to be tortured by the system you work in.
yeah, I think so. I think it's a very powerful kind of, I don't know if social justice is the right word, but I think the more people can be themselves in those situations, the more effective they're going to be, the more authentic it feels to interact with them when they're being their whole selves and they're not holding back something because they don't think, you know, these other folks will want to hear it, but they can actually speak their minds a little. Like, yeah, like I really think, I think the more, this is kind of like cheesy and hippy dippy, but I feel like if everybody felt empowered to be their true self, and you're not hurting anybody, you're just being yourself, right? And you pick the kind of job you want, you have the kind of family that you want, the friendships that you want, everybody be more happy, right? They weren't like kind of feeling pressure to clamp down some pieces of ourselves, right?
Totally. And think about how much like cognitive effort is required to like clamp down and suppress like all that. Well, it's, you know, it's funny you say that. maybe you know the story. I don't know if you know the story. The story of how Kid Connections got founded. Do you know that story?
So,
Oh my gosh, it's the best. Okay. So a then 8-year-old on the junior advisory board. We were like in a backyard, and I said, you know, we've been really thinking about how do we help kids feel like they belong? Do you have any thoughts about that? And this sweet little love, he says, you let us do what we love.
mm,
What do you mean? Well, if I'm doing what I love and that kid's doing what they love, like we're gonna feel like we belong.
nice,
So
nice.
that was Kid Connections. Like that, I mean, that is system change from the ground up. This is like a sweet little love with a sweet little idea that changes the world. You know, we've got 140 sweet little loves who now have friends. Like,
Nice.
and you know, did school solve that problem? No. Right. So it sometimes just doesn't have to be so complicated.
Mm, I agree. I agree. Definitely. Yeah, that's a great story. I'm glad you told me that. That's awesome.
Awesome.
Well, I think in my head, part of why I'm really enjoying being a part of all this journey is because the kernel of what you're doing feels so common sense, right? It's just so easy. And is if you're able to pass on the word as much as possible, I can picture, like, 10 years from now, at least 4 or 5 other practices like yours would be amazing, right? Um, all over all over the country or wherever. Like, I think that would be really, really great. Really great. Yeah. And then for people to even know that it exists, they're like, oh, I can actually seek out practices like that. I don't have to stay with this thing that I don't feel good about. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, right? Because I think like so many people they've never, like even in the healthcare space, they've never had a healthcare experience that feels safe and comfortable. They've never had a job where they could show up as their true self. They never had that, so they don't know that that's possible. So you see it. Hopefully you see it because you're experiencing it. But even if you don't, yeah, I hope that does, does help adapt people's expectations of what they should be expecting and demanding
Yeah.
from their environment.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. What they should demand and expect, right? Like, it's reasonable to expect that you're going to feel safe when you go to the doctor or any of those things. Yeah.
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 I
Awesome.
would say, like as a patient, like maybe about a year ago, I went in to get dental care, and there was like so much COVID going on, like so many people had COVID in our practice, and I went in and like nobody was wearing masks, and it felt really unsafe. And then it's an open air thing. I'll edit all this out, but it's an open air thing, and the person in the stall next to me coughed, and I flipped out and I walked out. And it was very difficult for me to get mouth words out, but all I was able to say is like, it's not safe here. And I walked out. I would never have been able to do that without my experience of transformation through the ABB village, because I am surrounded by people who think about safety and think about like, ooh, I have an internal body signal that sends me a clue that like something in my environment is not a fit for my access needs. Like, I didn't have that lens before this.
Wow. Wow. That's a really good, yeah, that's a really good example. That's good. Yeah, I didn't feel like I could talk about myself in any kind of deep way until I got involved with ABB. Really. I mean, it just like it spoke to me immediately as something that, like, you know what, Winnie, you're going to be 50 something. At some point, you're going to need to be authentic with people. Why not start right now?
That part of your journey, that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's so interesting because it is like this grand social experiment of like, hey, I'm gonna show up and try to be authentic. You want to do it with me? I don't really know what that looks like. I've never really had it before, but let's do it. And I think there's so many people who are hungry for such a thing.
So too. I think so too. And when I'm with, in environments where I know people are, they're plenty nice, but I know they're not giving us the whole story, right? They're just kind of giving a mask of who they are. And now I sit in those meetings and I'm like, that's too bad.
Yeah, it's too bad. It's like, oh, yeah, yeah. I
But
hope for
before it used to
you.
be like, oh, I wish I could hold it in that good,
Yes, like that's not even the goal because
Right.
like now my expectation is authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly.
awesome. Oh, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to say before I shut off the recording?
No, just thank you for inviting me. And I really appreciate being a part of all this. I really, really do.